Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Divedi, and in this segment today we are going to talk about rising inequality and divide because of the COVID-19 induced lockdown. This topic is important from the perspective of prelims and very important from the perspective of GS Mains paper 2 and 3. So let's begin with the topics of discussion that we are going to look at. First of all, we will talk about why news, then we will talk about the highlights of the report. The report is named as the inequality virus. We will call about the suggestions given by the report. We will try to link it with the challenges and the way forward, because that is how your mains answer writing should be. Everything should be interlinked. So we will walk by that. Then in the midst of the segment, I am going to ask you a pre-based question for which if you know the answer, kindly comment in the comment segment. So let's begin with why in news. So the news says that on the first day of the World Economic Forum's Davos dialogue, what has happened? The Oxfam report, one of the reports has suggested that there has been a rising inequality, and rising inequality in the sense that the billionaires became more rich and the poor became more poorer. So if we talk about this particular crisis, this has brought out the deeper fault lines which were already there in our society, and it has actually revealed them. Moving on to the highlights of the report, as I have already told you the name of the report, the inequality virus. It says that the wealth of the Indian billionaires increased by 35% during the lockdown and by 90% since 2009, ranking India 6th in the world after US, China, Germany, Russia and France. So every country has become rich at this point, in the sense that the rich has become richer and the poor has become poorer. That means it has revealed the inequalities, and it has actually aggravated the inequality which was pre-existing the COVID-19 induced lockdown. If we talk about India, it is being said that the billionaires, the top 11 billionaires actually of India, are so rich right now that they can finance the health ministry for 10 years. And if they wanted to, they can also finance the NAREGA program of India for 10 years. So you can imagine the wealth, the concentration of wealth amongst the billionaires of India. And it was being touted before the COVID-19 pandemic actually struck. And because of the lockdown, it was being touted that COVID-19 will be a great equalizer. But actually, it has shown stark differences between the richer and the poorer section of the society. Also, India's top 100 billionaires saw their fortunes increase by rupees 12.97 trillion, enough money to give every one of 138 million poorest Indians a check for rupees 94,045 each. In stark contrast, 1,70,000 people lost their job every hour in the month of April 2020. Month of April 2020, the beginning of the lockdown. So you can imagine the joblessness by this particular report, that 1,70,000 people, especially the migrant labor, especially the unskilled labor force of India, lost their job every hour. And this is harrowing. 1,70,000 people, just imagine that. Sectorally, India's large informal workforce was the worst hit, as it made 75% of the 122 million jobs lost. The 40 to 50 million seasonal migrant workers typically engaged in working in the construction sites, factories, were particularly distressed. So, as we saw in the months of April, May, June, when the lockdown was announced, there was a paranoia, and that paranoia actually came to fruition when the government introduced the lockdown. It imposed the lockdown. What did the migrants do? They had nowhere to go, no food to get into their bellies, no social security, and that is why they migrated from one place to another in search of food and shelter and to sustain their families. Also, the pandemic spiked health and education inequalities, because the richer already had some safety nets, in the sense they were saving enough beforehand, so they had proper access to healthcare. But the poor, which just live from hand to mouth, they did not have proper sustainability measures financially, and that is why it actually spiked health inequalities. Education inequalities, because of the COVID-19 induced lockdown, the education sector got digitalized up to a very great extent. and because as certain section of the people, the bigger section of the people of India do not have access digital or online education, this was bound to happen. Also, on the one hand, private providers such as Byju's and Unacademy experienced exponential growth, yet just 3% of the poorest 20% of Indian households had access to computer and just 9% had access to the internet. Now, this particular finding has shown that this is not just a short-term problem. This will aggravate further in the sense that whatever percentage of the citizens haven't received education, this will go on for a while, especially the inequalities which have been entrenched right now during this entire period will be something insurmountable for the next 10 years. Moving on, if we talk about only 6% of the poorest 20% households, they had access to non-shared sources of improved sanitation compared to 93% of the top 20% households in India. Just 37.2% of SC households and 25.9% of ST households had access to non-shared sanitation facilities compared to 65.7% for the general population. Now, this data generated over here will not be asked in your prelims question, but if you provide this data, it will definitely fetch you good marks. No, if you talk about the data, this data is provided just to show you that how deep the inequalities are, how chronic the inequalities have been, and how they have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And because of the lack of proper sanitation and healthcare facilities for certain castes, religion, sections of the society, even the economically backward classes, what has happened? This has actually stimulated the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic because of lack of proper sanitation facilities, and that is why they were at the receiving end of any type of mishappenings, right? Moving on, it also says that the unemployment rate amongst women rose from already high 15% before COVID to 18%. Women, another vulnerable group of the society. Now, women, the loss of income for women will cost GDP of India by 8%. 8% is something to ponder about, as women are expected secondarily to go out in the job sector and work. So, primarily they are supposed to, according to the societal mold, they are supposed to work as domestic helps, as caregivers, as they are a very significant part of the care economy. So that is why women were at the receiving end of unemployment or of reduction of labor force from the market. Also, if we talk about beyond income and job losses, what were the other causes? Poorer women also suffered health-wise because of disruption in regular health services, and Anganwadi centers. The pandemic also fueled domestic violence against women. Now, if we talk about domestic violence, because they were living in spaces which could have been avoidable due to the normal life, they were not avoidable anymore because of the lockdown imposed because of COVID-19 pandemic. And not only in India, domestic violence rose up to an extreme extent after the COVID-19 induced lockdown. So women were at the bay of every kind of misgivings or malhappenings, right? Moving on, if we talk about the suggestions made by this particular report says as the richer and the corporate sector has become richer and richer due to the COVID-19 induced pandemic, the markets that were created for masks, for sanitation, for sanitizers, for other kind of necessities due to the COVID-19 pandemic, those markets were grabbed by these corporate sectors. And now because they have become richer, so they should be doing investment in the healthcare and every kind of infrastructure which is social in nature, which will provide social net to the vulnerable section of the society. This report has also said that government should also provide proper social security net which is robust in nature, which is short-term, medium-term and long-term as well. And public health and education infrastructure is a must, because a lot of the students who have been already grappling in order to take care of their education, in order to equalize themselves with other students, because education is an equalizer. So through education, they wanted to equalize themselves, but they couldn't throughout this pandemic period. So government should definitely try to indulge more and more into the education sector, because as the WHO chief has already said that this is not the last pandemic. So India should be ready for every kind of pandemic which is infectious in nature and that can be a threat to the normal public life. So the government should make proper investment in healthcare and education infrastructure as well, because this report suggests so. Now if we talk about the challenges, first challenge is this challenge is very interesting. You have to hear it correctly. Growth versus distribution. Now if we want to distribute, first we have to grow, and now if we want to distribute and we do not grow, in the sense distribution comes from growth. Now growth will be possible only because of the corporate sector, much more because of the corporate sector, because corporate sector is more profit oriented, and if they become profit oriented, the concentration of wealth will be in the corporate sector's hand. So how to actually balance growth and distribution, because once growth is there, then only the distribution will be there. If the distribution will precede growth, how will growth happen? This is the actual concept we need here as a challenge. We have listed as a challenge. Lack of proper social security net. This has been existing in India since a very long time. Now, not is all gloomy in the Indian social security structure. Government has come up with many schemes to support the citizens from the vulnerable groups. But we need more robust and visionary social security nets. Also, corporatization. Now, corporatization is definitely a challenge in India, because corporatization, when it comes to a country which is developing, has been a bane rather than a boon in most of the countries. So if we need to take care, if we need to talk about challenges, this is the third challenge that we need to take care of, that corporatization should be put at the same pedestal as the public support. Public welfare. Sluggish economy. Now, economy of India was already sluggish before the COVID-19 induced lockdown. It was already not in a very bad, but at least in a bad state. Not as a good state as it was expected. So, economy is still sluggish now because of the COVID-19 induced lockdown. Although our Indian economy is moving at a much better pace than other countries' economies. But still, that's a problem for India. Now, if we talk about the way forward, you have to, as I told you in the beginning of the segment, that you have to interlink every concept. So first we need to boost the infrastructure sector. How? Because infrastructure sector is more employment oriented, skilled as well as much more unskilled. And because India has a huge labor force, which has actually been the most distorted one because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we need more and more infrastructure projects, and National Investment Infrastructure Fund is in the right direction. This is a move in the right direction. Social securitization, in the sense that proper security nets in terms of public health, education, digital penetration, everything should be provided. Now, this is not something that will come overnight, but the government needs to take care of many things. That it starts with mission and then moves to vision. So medium, short and long, all terms of vision, mission should be created. Also public health. Now this falls in the same category. Public health should be made robust. Ayushman Bharat Yojana before the COVID-19 pandemic was not sufficient to actually be an umbrella for such infectious diseases like the COVID-19 pandemic. This could also be enhanced in order to create the Ayushman Bharat to take care of infectious diseases as well. And corporate investment. Now this is of course much understood, that because they have become billionaires because of the corporate sector becoming so concentrated with wealth that they can finance the health ministry for the next 10 years. Investment must be done, proper taxation should be done, so that the finance which has been raised from corporate taxes could be put in the public arena, public health arena, public education arena, right? So that's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thank you so much for watching.